My guest today is a woman who turned her love of reading and writing into a 12-year career teaching English as a second language. But after becoming disillusioned with the institution of public education, she redirected that energy towards something far more personal and powerful. She reclaimed her children's education through homeschooling, their time as a family, her body as a woman, her health through food, her connection to femininity, and ultimately, her faith. Today, she lives with her husband and 3 children in a way that reflects deep purpose, growing and gathering their food, adventuring in nature, and communing with a tribe of like-minded homeschoolers. It was this radical commitment to sovereignty that birthed her book, Taking Back My Life, a beautiful collection of stories that invites readers to imagine what's possible when they give themselves permission to live freely. No boss, no schedule, no agenda. Just truth, trust, and the courage to choose a different way. In this episode, we talked about taking back our rights, the systems that control us in ways you wouldn't even think they're controlling us, and the rites of passage that come with womanhood that the system has intentionally stripped from our lives. Enjoy the episode. Hello, beautiful humans. Welcome back to another episode of the Skin I'm In podcast. I'm your host, Chanel, and this is the space where real stories meet radical self-discovery. Here, you'll find peace through clarity, purpose through inspiration, and the permission to be your authentic self through the stories of men and women who've walked the path before us. If this show moves you, hit that like button, share it with someone you care about, or subscribe so you never miss an episode. That small but powerful act helps the show grow and brings in the guest you most want to hear from. In return, my promise to you is that I'll keep showing up with the raw, the real, and the conversations that crack us wide open, reminding us we're not alone. So, let's dive in and find the light in the shadows together. Welcome to the Skin I'm In podcast, Mary. It's so great to have you on the show. Oh, there are so many things that I want to get stuck into. Your book literally lit a fire in my belly. I found myself looking forward to it every single night. I'd tuck into my bed with my dog and we would just cuddle up and I would, read your book. And I was really drawn in by your stories and the way you moved through your own life, being on one side of the fence to the other. And there are so many standout moments that I'd love to dive deeper in with you. So let's start at the beginning. You used to be, and this really moved me, right? And I'll tell you why in a minute, but you used to be an English teacher, an English as a second language teacher to immigrants, many of them refugees who fled war-torn countries in search of safety and a fresh start in the US. What was some of your realizations that you had listening to their stories and witnessing their way of life that was so different to the way that you knew?
Initially, when I was teaching in the high school where I taught mostly refugees, I had this idea, this very American idea, that all the students had just won the lottery and got to America and their lives were going to be better and we saved them, right? And the longer I taught them, I just would read their stories. And I talk about the Karen population specifically in the book. And several of the Karen students I had, it's an ethnic group of Burma, but I would just, and they grew up in refugee camps, right? But they would talk about their lives and it sounded so much more free than what I witnessed them and the other students in the school, the other American students even experiencing on a day-to-day basis. Because these kids were talking about playing soccer and hunting and fishing. And then there they are in my classroom, my classroom was the most out of the box probably in the school, but they go to other classrooms and they're just sitting at desks all day long, listening to language they don't understand. And even, the American students who do understand the language, they're just essentially prisoners in this compulsory education system. And so it really started to shift my mindset and I started craving, a little piece of what they had left behind. I wanted that for my children and my family.
And then so you realized that there was something fundamentally not right about the public education system and it was no longer aligned with your values. Take me through that, because a lot changed for you over that period of time.
Yeah. And so it was, it was the students I met. I mean, I believe it was all God just funneling my life to where it was supposed to go. I look at it now and all these pieces just lined up. I had these students that started to open my mind. I also have a son now in the school system, in a different school than me, that was, crying most days, not wanting to go to school, as I, wake him up early, give him breakfast, rush him off to school. I went through a divorce and I met my current husband, and, he started to open my eyes on just the mainstream lifestyle and how it really isn't working for most people, right? And that's like a thing that I think so many people aren't willing to admit, right? Like if you look out now, I live so removed from the mainstream world, it's hard to like even remember that life. But when when you go to public places often, it's just you see so much, or even schools, like when I was in the school, you see just unhealth everywhere, physical unhealth, emotional unhealth, spiritual unhealth. And it's like we're not made to be like this. There has to be another way, right? And so yeah, I just started to want something else. I wanted everything to change. I wanted to get my son out of the school system. I didn't want to work for someone else anymore. I started to see, I tell the story in the book of just like being in a Walmart and hearing a man ask permission to go to the bathroom. And that was just such a tiny thing that just shifted my mind of like, wait, why? Why are we in a system, in a world where an adult has to ask permission to go to the bathroom from another adult? I don't want to live in that world anymore. And so, yeah, I really, the couple years between having that realization, fully accepting that the world I had been living in was not the world I wanted to live in anymore. Once I fully accepted that, then it was maybe a couple of years. And it was a painful couple of years, because once you realize you're in this prison that you don't want to be in anymore, then it's harder, right? Like until you realize that, maybe it's just the way you've always lived and you don't question that there's anything else out there. And so for most of my life, I was there. I was happy enough, right? But then once I had that realization, it was a couple of years, and it was a painful couple of years wanting to spend time with my child. I knew as a mother, I knew it was not natural to send my child away for the majority of every day, 5 days a week out of the week. And so I say in the book, but I said shortly before March 2020 that I wanted the world to end as we knew it, so that I didn't have to worry about like custody agreements or anything, and I could just rewrite my life. And then that happened. Again, it could be God or whatever. And I really, as hard as the couple of years after that were for so many people, I also think it was this great opportunity to completely rewrite your life. And that's what I did. I threw caution to the wind. And my husband and I moved into a canvas tent in the woods on an acre of land, so that we could financially make this change happen, because it was so important to us. It wasn't going to be, we can't do it because of X, Y, and Z. We can't do it because of money. It was like, we're not sending Merrick, my oldest son, to school in a mask to sit away from other people. But it was also just a permission slip to rewrite everything. And so we completely altered our life. And I'll stop there to see if you have anything to say about that.
So many things, because one of the things that really stood out in the book for me was you talked about, institutions that keep us small, and that's coming up in what you're saying right now, and how you really wanted to shift from that life, and how, when you were talking about, once you know that you want to change, it's really suffocating until you get to step into that change and trying to find your tribe and things like that. But in your view, what are the maybe subtlest ways, modern systems shrink us without us realizing? Because I think a lot of people who aren't awake, haven't switched on yet to that, that light within them, they just don't realize how deeply woven it is to our every single day life, the way that we are controlled. So what do you think are some of the things that people just don't realize that they're stuck in?
I mean, the biggest, I would say, our time, right? Our just my life now, and this is why I had to write the book, because my life now is, I can't even say it's a life I dreamed about. It's a life I couldn't have even dreamed about. I didn't know it was possible. I didn't dare dream it. And it just unfolded. But my time is mine and my family's. And yes, I have obligations to my children and my husband and our chickens, all that. But like, it's my people and my friends, my tribe. It's not an institution, right? And I don't have to wake up and rush somewhere first thing in the morning and be there all day. And that was one of the things too. Like so when I met my husband, he owns a landscaping company, and so even just seeing, like, owning your own business, like, you are able, like yeah, as a podcaster, right? Like, you get to make your own schedule, and if you don't feel like showing up, I'm sure you can change things around. Um, but yeah, so your time is so valuable, and so many people give up so much of it, um, really for nothing, right? Like, I don't know, it's especially a lot of jobs that people don't, they're not, there's no heart behind it. They don't care about what they're doing. They're just doing it for a paycheck because they, need to feed their family. And that leads me to another thing that keeps us small is food. Um, Food, I was thinking about it earlier today when I was thinking about this podcast. Like, our values in our family, like, food is very high on there. And it sounds weird, but um, so many people have lost such a connection to, like, one of the things that is so important to our lives, which is our food. And I spend a great deal of my time now growing my food, raising my food, processing my food. And it's a communal thing, right? I do it with my kids. I get to teach them how to do those things, and like finding food. God put food all over, and we forget that it's all over for free. And so we work all these hours to pay for this food that's in the grocery stores that's riddled with pesticides, when in we've in our family we've just been in this cycle of, like, fruit after fruit that's abundant, and most of it we didn't even grow. It's just like, oh, blackberries are growing over here, and now, like, cherries were growing first, and then raspberries, and then strawberries, and so much of it is wild. And but people don't know. There's so much of it growing even in the city. When we lived in the city, we knew where all the mulberry trees were. There's so many people that don't even know that they can feed themselves, because that knowledge has been taken away from us. Like, you think you go to school for 12 years, no one really teaches you what you can eat in those 12 years. No one thinks maybe that's important information that we should teach our children how to feed themselves. But if you do, they won't be tied to the system, right? They won't follow all the rules and go to school and then go to college to get these jobs to then continue being sick with this food that then keeps them tied to the healthcare system, which is also corrupt. And it's just this horrible, it's so nefarious that it's really hard to open your eyes to. And that's one of the things I described in the book is, I remember waking up, as you call it, and I remember not wanting to. Like, my husband would open like, when he would bring up vaccines, I remember I remember wanting to argue with him on it, and I didn't know why. And then I slowly would realize, like, if this is true, if we are really being poisoned from the time we're born, then this whole thing is a lie, right? This whole life that I've been living for 3+ decades is a lie, and I have to rewrite um, my whole belief system. And so I could have been like, no, I don't want to do that. I'm not going to go down that road. But I didn't. I finally got on board with seeing how nefarious it was, and then I regained my autonomy eventually. And it didn't take that long. Like, it's not that hard if you're brave enough to realize that you're bigger than you were made to believe you are.
You just brought up something so, so important. And I know that you said it sounds silly to think of food, but if you consider, and in the conversations that I have, right, a lot of people, like, they're so focused on what the government's doing and the next government, especially in your country, it's the government's going to save us. But the truth of it is, and the way that I see it, is that if you just learned how to grow your own food, how to take back your time, how to educate your own children, the government has no control over your life.
Mm-hmm.
You then don't put your children into the system, the school system, which then feeds into I call it the slave system of working, because it's really preparing them to be able to go and sit at a desk in an office and go to lunch when the bell rings and come back because that's when you're meant to, and ask for permission to go to the bathroom. It really teaches you, really asks you to conform from the moment that they can try to get you to conform into your life as an adult. And so because we're not taught any of those things, how to actually do anything for ourselves, all of us go through a process of being, or a time frame of being ignorant to our own power as human beings and our right to sovereignty. Ooh, getting emotional. Our right to that, because it's fundamental. It's not negotiable. And yet we try to negotiate that every single day of our lives. And, the other thing that you brought up, that resistance, your own resistance, like, I had a spiritual experience at the age of 7 that really changed the way I looked at the world. And I knew from the day that I, walked into school in Australia that something was fundamentally not right. I grew up in Lebanon. We fled the war in 1990. And when you were talking about the stories, I'm going to get emotional again. When you were talking about the stories of the refugees and the immigrants in your book, I just remember thinking, when I started getting into all the self-development work stuff, I had to really ask myself, when was the last time I was happy? When was the last time I remember being happy? And it was when I was in my war-torn country with my neighbors, walking the streets barefoot, throwing sand at the bats at night and watching them fall. And so I think to myself, we've come so far from being connected to our lives, the people in our lives, culture, togetherness, food, all of those things. And it really, like, I keep being moved by the things that you're saying, because I can honestly say, when you say that this is the life you couldn't have possibly have dreamed of, this life, I'm reading your book and I'm like, she lives my dream life.
Mm-hmm.
You're literally living everything that I want for myself. And one of the things I also loved is, in the book, you talk about how the shame you had at mocking your now husband, about the injection schedule, and how that shame had come from a place of, understanding or not understanding your own stance on vaccines, and not being, it didn't come from your perception didn't come from a place of, any research. And that was huge. You said that it was like just this blind trust in the system. And that hit me. I'm like, I can't even imagine how many people argue that way.
Right.
So when that shift occurred within you, like, what was that? Because I think that it's like you said, you could have said no to all of it, but you didn't. Something was clearly working through you. What was that?
Ah, that's a good question. I'm not sure if this is right. I mean, I think there were undertones in me of questioning, right? I think I was not as closed off to the possibility as some people, um, but I also just fell in love with my husband, and so like I stuck around long enough to like listen to a podcast, right? Like you're spreading the good word, and something I heard resonated with me, and yeah, then I had the realization of like it wasn't even like I had this blind trust in the government. It was just like I didn't even question. Like I didn't. It wasn't even something I thought of questioning. And then to have that a realization of like, oh wow, I don't know. It's so crazy now. It's so crazy where I am now to remember that piece of me. But I'm glad that I've lived both sides of it because it does make me a little more empathetic when I see people that empathetic and sad when I see people that are still stuck in the because they meaning the people that have orchestrated this to keep us small and keep us subservient. Um, they've very craftily done this, right? And so they've made it so people are able to just get so fired up on an issue that they really don't have an opinion on, but they're just programmed to like, oh, there's a key word. Like if someone brings that up, be angry about it. And so to go back to something you said, yeah, so when COVID started, it really helped to open my eyes to things. And we did spend some time getting tied up in like what the government was doing and what people were buying into and following the storylines that are going on. And then we finally got to the point of realizing like it's more important. We need to spend more of our energy on our sovereignty, on growing our food, on educating our own children, putting ourselves in a position financially where we can make our health decisions, like our own health decisions, keep ourselves healthy. Um, and and that's the greatest gift that we've given ourselves and that we're giving our children too. I'm so excited that like especially my younger two are not going to know any other way. They're just going to think this is the way everyone lives. Um, and I'm so happy with that.
I can imagine. So I wanted to, it's obviously coming up for me right now. There's a passage in the book that I really want to share with you that stood out for me. And I love, and before I read it out, I love that you explain going down the rabbit holes as pulling on a thread of a sweater and it just unravels. That vision is it's so true. It's like you can't fix it. You can't fix the gaping hole in that sweater anymore. But you're right. I also strongly believe that those that criticize are the ones who are not yet brave enough to admit the very difficult truth that they have messed up at times, that they have been tricked as well. For to admit that the system is corrupt is like pulling at the threads of a sweater. Once you do it, you can try to cut that frayed piece off and tie it back up, but the sweater will never be the same. How did you come to that? What was that for you? Because that is so deep. Like that's a realization that it really moved me.
Oh, thank you. Because it was, and you've gone through it. You went through it at a younger age, and I can't imagine what that felt like to go through that at 6 or 7. But yeah, it's like once you finally admit something, once you finally admit like, oh wait, we're not supposed to be working like slaves all the time, and not having time to realize how sovereign and great we are. And so the school system is corrupt, and with COVID, it was easy to start to see the corruption too, right? Like I saw people are just complying to this thing. And yeah, some people actually believe it. And then some people are just complying and doing things that are so unnatural and so developmentally detrimental to our children and putting masks on their children just because they're going along with it. And so you see, okay, well, if they're going along with it, what else are they going along with in their life? Okay, they went into a school system that, like you pointed out, is designed to have them just go along with things, just acquiesce, right? Like that's how you don't stand out. That's how you don't get in trouble. And if they're just going along with that, then what health choices are they making? That I talk about language a lot in the book, and I hear I used to hear so much people say like, well, I have to get this surgery, or I have to get on this prescription. The doctor said I have to do this. And so it's like, okay, well, these people just don't even, they don't, they're giving another adult human total authority over their body. They're just assuming that this person knows the best. And they're not doing any research on their own. They're not finding out if there's any natural ways to heal things, which there's so many. There are so many way more effective, easier ways to heal yourself. Like anyone out there that doesn't yet know that, like once you start to go down that realm and like you just heal this thing you thought you had to like take an addictive prescription for, your mind will be blown. So yeah, it was just a toppling of cards, and it happened so quickly. And then I had to reclaim all those pieces of my life that I realized were owned by someone else. And I'm happy that I have mostly done that. And it's kind of, I want to pinch myself sometimes. I can look back and think like, this was a life that was on a vision board, right? Like we wanted to have bees and chickens and all the things that people see on Netflix documentaries, right? But that seems so unattainable. Again, because we weren't taught it. It's this ancestral way of being that we should just know as children, right? My son is 1.5. Not even, he's almost 1.5. He knows what berries he can pick around our property and which ones he can't. It's like, at first it's like, oh, is he just picking any berry and eating it? And then we taught him like these 1 berries you can't, and he would like point at them and say yuck, or like anywhere we were, he'd find the berries and he'd point them out to other adults. He'd point it, say yuck. He'd even take them off the tree sometimes and throw them on the ground, and then like he'd go over and eat other ones. My 4-year-old, she'll go into almost any place and she'll just start showing adults like, oh, here, you can eat this, you can eat this, and the adults will be like, is this okay to eat? I'm like, if my 4-year-old says you can eat it, you can. But yeah, there's so much that is hidden from us, and I can't imagine what it was like to grow up generations ago where this was just common knowledge and everyone shared it with the next generation, and we helped our daughters birth their own children, and we gave them that we taught them that they have that power. They have the power to birth their children. They have the power to source their own food. All of it.
Oh, look, you and I know that it's by design that we've been disconnected from our source and from the wisdom of previous generations. And I think so many people are not really, whether it's aware or whether they're wanting to live in ignorance, because it is blissful. I remember how blissful it was until I really started doing the work, because there are so many myths and narratives that we have to unlearn in order to trust ourselves, which is ridiculous. And so when you think of what you had to unlearn for yourself to trust who you are as a mother and a teacher and a homemaker, what were some of those things do you think that you had to unlearn specifically?
Good question. The first one that comes to mind is I had to relearn what it means to be a woman. And I grew up in the 90s in America. I don't know how similar it is to Australia. But there was just this push of like the feminist movement was women get to be men now, essentially. Um, and so, I mean, I I enjoyed parts of that, right? Like I got to play all these sports, and I think that was really great for me. But it convinced women, I think, that to be successful, it was to hold a high-paying job, or even for me, it was just like being a teacher and working outside the home. And um, and I remember like post my divorce, it was like this. I would say like I don't know how much I said I was a strong, independent woman, but my husband likes to say that I did say that. But saying it in this like I don't need no man, kind of way, and I just think that's so misguided now. And that's another thing that I learned from my students actually, because I had all these, I had a lot of girls from Middle Eastern countries and Central American countries, African countries, so many countries that are not, Europe or America. And so there was this push, right? So like most of the school system is white women teaching whichever students. And so we had these ESL students and they're refugees, and a lot of them, the mothers stay home and raise the children, and the daughters may have wanted to just do the same, right? To honor the greatest gift we have as women, which is to birth children and raise them and make a home, however you do that. And there was just this philosophy that I think so many of the white women, including myself, were like, oh, now you're in America. Now you get to like throw that all away, go to college, get a job. And now I apologize to any students if I did push them in that direction and they didn't want to go in that direction. That's another thing is, man, the misguided messaging that I hate to keep saying white women, but it's like so much driven by them. And you said you grew up in Lebanon, and it's just like just such an ignorant mindset, and it comes from it's well intending, but it's misguided. It's trying to convince them that they're experiencing like all this racism here in America when they're like, actually, it's fine. Can we just like be happy now that we're here? Things like that. And so, anyways, I finally came around to like wanting to stay home with my children, raise them, be a homemaker, right? And there's this a woman's place is in the kitchen, right? Like we fought against that so much. And the irony is now I spend so much time in my kitchen, but I love my kitchen. And yesterday my husband was great. He came home from work early, and he took the kids to like this homeschool stream at our friend's house. And I like worked with my honey and got wax out of it, and I canned beets and onions and jalapenos, and I made a blueberry pie from blueberries we had harvested, and it feels so fulfilling. But I never realized that, right? I thought like, no, if I'm in a kitchen, I'm just being ruled by the patriarchy. And now I see that it's just become so convoluted.
Isn't it funny how they've convinced us through incredible marketing that what comes naturally to us is not something we should aspire to, and that it's wrong for wanting that. As you were talking, I was not even thinking about this even in preparation for this conversation today, but as you were talking, I was thinking, growing up, that's all I ever wanted. Given my upbringing, my sisters were completely opposite. They both went to uni, multiple degrees, all the corporate jobs. They love it. They love it. And I'm like, there is something I'd rather die than do your job. And I remember really struggling in relationships. When I would meet someone, I'm like, no, I want to raise my children. And it was seen as, she just wants to be a housewife. I'm like, I saw how much my mum struggled as a single mum and, working 2 jobs, trying to keep a roof over our head, often crying at night, crying herself to sleep because she didn't know how she was going to, keep putting a roof over our heads, and she had no support. And I'm like, but the love and the commitment I felt from that, I could sense that. I'm like, and I want to do that for my children. That doesn't mean I want to suffer the way my mum did and struggle, but I want to create a protective space for my children. Like that's something I've always wanted. And as you were just talking, I'm like, oh wow, I really struggled in relationships, especially in my 20s, because that's what I wanted. And men and women had been taught that to want that is below your capacity as a woman. But it's so timely that you talk about this, because the other passage from the book that I love, this made my heart sing, is you talk about, as you said, I heard too much the former messaging and post-divorce proclaimed myself to be a strong, independent woman. I chuckled when I heard that. I bought my own house and didn't need no man, or so I thought, or so my mind thought, but my heart, my yin, knew it needed to find its yang. And despite swearing off men, Michael came into my life in all of his masculine glory. Oh, this allowed the masculine shell to melt off my person, displaying my raw, vulnerable femininity, allowing it to develop and shine into what it is today. I wept. I was just like, oh, what does that even feel like? So talk to me about how you reclaimed your femininity through your masculine husband.
Well, it wasn't easy. I will tell you that. It wasn't easy for either of us. But yeah, it's right. It is so ironic how that happened, but also it makes complete sense. When we as women live in a world where the men aren't stepping up to their masculine role, right? Like they are not strong in all the ways, right? Emotionally, physically. When so we're left to our own devices and we are filling in the blanks, right? We're trying to fill that masculine role. And I think so much of the past generation, men were, they were working factory jobs. They were doing all the things we've already explained are set up to make us miserable. And so there were, it was an epidemic in this country of just the men not stepping up to their role. And so women were trying to fill that void by becoming the masculine. And I did that. And so when I met my husband, I was turned off by those pieces of him, right? Like I thought he was trying to oppress me sometimes just because he I think just I don't even know specifics of what it was, but I think he envisioned a relationship where we were both filling our roles in a beautiful way, not in. And I think that's where we get confused. We think like, oh, if there's the masculine over here and there's the feminine over here, one has to be higher, one has to be lower. And I don't think that's true now. I think right we fit together so perfectly, but it took it takes a long time to rewrite a whole life of stories. But finally, slowly I started to see, and I think it is innately in me. Like you said, you wanted to be like your mother was. You wanted to care for your children, and so I had that in me too. I mean, it's probably why I became a teacher. And my mother stayed home with us, so I had that role model of what it meant to be in the feminine. But I saw my mom do that, and because all of society was telling me that was wrong, I didn't want to be like my mom, right? Like I pushed against that, and so I I first did a 180 of like, okay, I'm not going to be like my mom. I'm going to be strong and independent. And then now I'm trying to relearn all the things. I just literally called my mom this morning, like, help me fix my sewing machine. um, and I couldn't be happier because there is a perfect balance in our household, right? My we both support each other, right? My husband's the one making the money, and I'm the one holding down the household, and those are both and very important jobs. And not only is he making the money, but he's also like doing the manly tasks of the household, right? Like he's building the things. He has the masculine brain that can just like research things nonstop and figure out how to do something. I don't do that. I don't know. I'm just like the feminine, like in the flow, like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to write a book. We're going to see how it goes. And so when we finally got to the point of realizing like we are different and that's great. And now we can peacefully come together and figure out how this works and raise our kids together. And it's so beautiful. But it does take work. And so like just be patient with yourself in like unlearning all the things you need to unlearn if you're like me. And it's just sometimes, I still catch myself doing it. It's like when you start to have a thought, sometimes you have to really realize like, or you have to really look into it. Is this my thought, or is this programming that I have to relearn? And I don't do it anymore. But when I first quit teaching, I still couldn't get this bug of like, I have to make money. I don't mean anything if I'm not making money. And so I did these like random things. I would try, I was a yoga teacher and I did real estate and they were all just like grasping at straws because they were trying to fill up a void that wasn't actually there in me, right? It was just a programmed societal void that I didn't need to fill up. Like once I finally was like, oh, that's all. I do tutor. I got a tutoring gig, but I enjoy it. I love the boys I tutor. But I no longer feel like I have to make money to mean anything. I know that the blueberry pie I made yesterday, that it doesn't matter if it took a day and it was eaten in less than a day. It like that means so much more than going out and making money and being stressed and not teaching my children real life skills.
Hey folks, quick gut check. Are you actually nourishing your insides or just surviving on lattes and get through the week vibes? I'm here to tell you it doesn't have to be that way. There is a way to boost your energy, cleanse your system, and kick that bloat to the curb. Enter Supercharged Food, a proud supporter of this show and a beautiful heart-led business founded by a clinical nutritionist who believes that real healing starts in the gut. They offer powerful nutritionist-developed supplements like Fulvicumic drops, collagen-boosting bundles, and their best-selling Love Your Gut Synbiotic, packed with prebiotics, probiotics, and digestive enzymes your microbiome will love. Plus, their books and recipes will change the way you look at health from the inside out. Hit the link in the show notes and use the code TheSkinI'mIn to get 10% off every order. Alrighty, let's get back to the show. There's also something to be said for just how much the pie would have been enjoyed if it was devoured in less than a day. Do you know what I mean? Like there are so many like proud mum moments that I'm hearing from you that I would have just, I can imagine myself, if that was me and my family was at the table, I would just be sitting there watching what they're doing and being like, we literally picked those blueberries together and I literally put all of that pie together and now it's all in your bellies. And I know that every part of what I made is healthy and clean and nutritious. And wow, like I feel that is so inspiring for me. And to be able to hear what you're saying, and I totally get it, that whole piece of the feminine, it is so hard to surrender. It is foreign to receive as a woman because it's almost like we've been drilled into this. You're a gold digger if you're trying to go after someone who's going to provide for you. And so I think that a lot of us have shame around just wanting to be what we are literally on this earth to be. Like whatever we birth It's a gift. Like that is something that we know how to do instinctively. And whatever you give a woman, she multiplies. And that's anything creative, whether it's to make a baby, to write a book, to, make clothes, to make a pie, whatever it is, that is what we do. We take things and we multiply it. And so it's so beautiful the way that you describe it in the book. And I'm not going to share any more passages from that section because I just think that whole chapter, for me, I actually read it twice because I am the person that does all the researching. And it's only because I've had to be self-sufficient from such a young age. My mum was focusing on trying to keep a roof over our head, very much in her masculine, protect, provide, while my older sister was my mum. And so we were pretty much left to our devices through school holidays and things like that. And I also grew up in the 90s, and I'll tell you what it was like in Australia. Australia as a country looked up to the US like you guys just knew how to do everything. And so it's until this day, I often feel like the Australian government romanticizes about being a US ally and, being just like the US. And I remember moving from, I grew up in Sydney. I now live in Melbourne. But when I went from Sydney to living in Canada, and I used to talk about how wonderful it is in Australia, 5 years passed, I went home back to Australia and so many things had changed. So many of our government systems had replicated what was being done in the US and across Canada in terms of like our health systems. And just, I came back to a completely different country. And it saddens me because in hindsight, looking back on my childhood in Australia, we lived such a simple life. It was very simple. Kids played in the street. My mum never wondered where we were. We were just with the neighbours' kids. And it was normal to do that. And so I think we've lost a lot of our freedoms, not only physical freedoms, but our, mental and spiritual freedoms through wanting to be like the US. And we very much have that life now. I think we're like ranking just behind you guys in so many things when it comes to healthcare, like how bad our health is, the obesity rates, the taxes that we pay. The taxes we pay are ludicrous, ludicrous. And so yeah, what has happened here is a very big shame. And I do miss the 90s. Growing up in the 90s was awesome. I feel like it was that last decade of awesomeness. That 95 to 2005, I'm going to say, that decade was epic. I want to talk about your births because my baby Jesus, they were, I don't even have the words because I'm like, do I talk about her hospital birth or do I talk about that moment where you just went into a trance when you were home birthing? Because I was like fixated when you were writing about that. So you know what? I feel called to talk about that. Tell me about that trance-like experience of home birthing. That was your first home birth, wasn't it?
Yeah. So my second birth, my first home birth. Yeah, and it's so funny because again, we have this idea through movies and media and all this stuff that birth is this horrible experience that we're meant to just get it over with as quickly as possible, as painless as possible. And that is the furthest thing from the truth, in my opinion, through my experiences. And when I hear women talk about it being easy because they got the epidural and whatever, I mourn for them because they don't know what they're missing, and that's why one of the reasons I had to write the book. And so after I birthed Micah and I had that experience, I was like, I literally was like, I have to do that again. Like, it was, my husband has gone on psychedelic journeys, and he described it as that. He's like, I saw you just go on this journey that like many people have to do through plant medicines, and I just did it in the most natural way. And I 100% think now we are meant to. So there's phases in a woman's life, right? We are a daughter, and then we're a young woman, and then when we step into motherhood, it's a rite of passage, and there's so many rites of passage that we've lost in our culture. But this is the biggest one to me. It's been stolen from us by convincing us that we can't do it without a doctor in a mask and drugs. But what is meant to happen is you are supposed to go through the most excruciating pain possible. And I have read home birth books where they do describe it as being painless. And so maybe some people do it naturally and it is painless. For me, neither of my home births were painless. They were far from it. They were incredibly painful, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. Because, yeah, so I read the home birth books. I thought I knew what to expect. And then just, I was in so much pain. And so I remember thinking, like, I don't know if I can do this. And then my mind, my spirit essentially just left my body. And I just was in this trance-like state for I don't know how long. And I can really only recall my birth mostly from watching the videos. It was mostly recorded. But I left my body and it knew what to do. I knew what to do. My body was designed for this. And so then at the end of that journey, you have a baby, your baby in your arms. And it is the most incredible thing. And it's supposed to be messy and it's supposed to be painful and it's supposed to be this point in your life when you completely change. And obviously motherhood, no matter what, is going to completely change you. But I really feel like, with my first son, it was a hospital, it was traumatic. And I didn't have that rite of passage. I really, when I look back, I think, there's other reasons too. Like I was doing all the mainstream things. I was sending him to school. But I think a big piece of it is like there's hormones, there is all the things that are supposed to happen between the mother and the baby that are taken from us. The natural birth, that trance-like state we're supposed to experience. The co-sleeping, like I sleep with my babies. I still sleep with my son. That skin to skin, like it's so beautiful. It's so natural and it's taken away from most women. And so I really think this is the reason that there's so many people not sharing the good news of motherhood and creating a generation of women who don't want to be mothers. There's so many people that just don't ever want to be mothers. And I really think it's because the true beauty of it in all its rawness is not shared enough. And so I want to shout it from the rooftops. I want to say, like, one more quick thing on this. I remember just being in a coffee shop and overhearing this woman saying, like, I don't want to have kids, but if I ever did, I would want, like, to be put out. I want a C-section. I want them to clean the baby and hand it back to me and when it's clean. And I just, I held it back, but I just wanted to shout, like, it's not supposed to be clean. And it's a metaphor for everything we're doing right now. Like, we want everything so sterile and perfect, and we're afraid of the raw, dirty, uncomfortableness of life.
What you bring up is just, I to sit there and think that someone wants to have such a sterile birth, I'm just like, just don't have one. Just don't be a mother, please, because you are going to be the mother who's going to mask your baby at 6 months and cause all kinds of problems. And, so many times, there's been a few births around me in the last couple of years, and so many times I heard I really wanted to have a natural birth, but I had to have an emergency C-section. And I'm like, did you? Or did they fearmonger you into having a C-section because the hospital actually gains finances and makes it quicker for them and they don't have to take care of you and have you in there for as long as you need to be if you're going to have a natural birth? And we are taught to not trust ourselves. We're taught to not trust our bodies. We're taught to like we've been saying all along, put our trust into something, someone outside of ourselves. And when you were talking, in the book about just every piece of your home birth and even your hospital birth with your firstborn, I just kept thinking to myself, I don't care how conspiracy theorist I sound. I love being called a conspiracy theorist. I literally need to make myself a tinfoil crown. But they are literally taking away from women the things that connect us to life, giving life, creating life, by telling us not to sleep with our co-sleep with our babies, by telling us not to breastfeed, give them formula, by telling us to wean them off breastfeeding as soon as possible, to, get your body back, have the epidural, make it really quick so that you don't have to, because I know that people say, because you get to book in a C-section and you know when the baby's coming. I know someone who labored for days. Days. I think the baby went over like 8 or 9 days, and she was just chill having brunch with her husband, her partner. And she just waited until she actually had the baby naturally, and she home birthed as well. And so I just think that this agenda, I'm going to be real, I think it's an agenda to make sure that we forget as women what it actually is to be a woman, what it actually is to birth and create life and bring it into this world the way that it's meant to come into this world, and to be able to trust ourselves. And I feel like we're treated like dummies in the hospital system. And so I was wondering, when I was reading your book, how do you think each birth reshaped your sense of self?
You said so many good things right there. And can I say something before I answer the question?
Of course.
I think you had asked earlier about like those threads of the sweater, right? And like starting to see, like you said, it's all by design. And I really think the things you just touched on are the biggest and the easiest to see. It's insane to me now that any mother can believe that she should not sleep with her baby. And I was guilty of it. So I'm not making fun of anyone out there. I put my first son in a grip, and I can't believe that I did. I've lost a friend over her telling me I was going to kill my baby. I've been told by family members that. But it's so hard to really believe that narrative when you look at every other maternal animal is sleeping with they're not going and putting the baby somewhere else. And, it's just insanity. And so, it's trying to cut us off from being the great mothers we are meant to be and to have this bond with our child. And so why are they doing that? Right? Because it's easier to make people puppets in a machine, right? To work for someone else, to be a part of this system, to believe that essentially the government, the system is trying to be the mommy and daddy, right? They're trying to still take care of adults. And that's what we're talking about this whole conversation, is that we don't actually become true adults until we can take care of ourselves. And it's not saying that we can't get help from other people. Like, I'm the biggest proponent of having a tribe, a support group, but to believe that, this person tells me when I can birth my babies and how I can birth my babies and what medicine needs to go into my mouth and the mouth of my children and what curriculum is being taught to my children. Like, when we just give all of that away, we are not letting ourselves be adults. We are continuing to be children, and we're letting the government, the system, the media, who is, all of them are in the pockets of the billionaires, we're letting them be our parents. Oh my gosh.
Because I feel like every single birth would have really had you looking at yourself and being like, oh my God, it would have changed you.
Yeah. And I think I was saying that, like, that rite of passage as a mother. And so with my first, I remember saying, I love my son, but I don't love being a mother. And I can't believe I ever said that now. Like, my son and I have this amazing relationship, and I love being his mother and the mother of my other two children. But I said that because I think I did all the things the mainstream way. And it's meant to make us not care to be a mother and not to birth again. And so we can give our time to the corporations and we could try to make as much money as the men, which of course we don't because we're supposed to like take time off and have babies. But so, after my son, I was a good mother, but I didn't love being a mother yet. And then I met my husband, and that, having my daughter with my husband and having that, we were both on the same page. We were moving in the same direction and we were creating this family. And I really believed in the family unit. I knew we had a mission, right? The mission that we are currently living out. We had that mission, and it's just gone on from there. Like with Micah joining our family, we were a family of 4, and we were starting to make our dreams come true. And then as we progressed as a family, it was like our family. I remember before we didn't know if we were going to have another one, and I just felt like our family was so perfect, and not perfect. I mean, there's hard times, and we've been through some really hard stuff that we don't have to get into. It hasn't always been perfect for sure, but like I said, we were always on a mission as a family. That's what I loved as our family unit. We were always on a common goal, and so like all of the hardship couldn't break us, couldn't get in the way. And I wanted to bring, I knew there was another being out there that needed to be part of this. I wanted to share it with another being, and that is my son, Mana. And after birthing him, I felt complete. But I have a new strength after birthing him. I don't know if it's because of the birth of him, because your question was like, how have I changed throughout my birth? And so I don't know if the way I've evolved is because of birthing them, but of course that is a piece of it. And I definitely have a new strength, a new confidence in myself since having Mana. And our relationship is better than it's ever been. We've learned to really ebb and flow together, and yeah, I just really believe in myself. I believe in my mothering, and I really feel like, obviously, I wrote a book about it. I feel like I'm doing the right things. I'm doing the best by my children with the decisions I've made, and I'm really proud of that.
One of the things that I really feel inspired by that is becoming a bit of a movement, it was actually even on news the other day. I was at the gym and I noticed that there seems to be a theme of kids not wanting to go to school anymore. And I thought, well, that's an interesting headline. And the journalists were obviously trying to give helpful tips to parents to help their kids go back to school, because that's what we all want. And I'm like, no, the kids know that there's something fundamentally very wrong with the system, especially after 2020, 2021. So I want to talk about your homeschool journey. All 3 of your children are homeschooled, and you've got a trusted network of like-minded families that you call your tribe. I want to talk about the tribe as well, that you choose to spend your time with now. What do you notice about the homeschooled families that you now are around versus when you were in the system?
I'm still like, I'm surprised sometimes still when I like go into the real world and I like see. I mean, there's great people everywhere, right? Obviously, but in the homeschooled community, it's just there's no depression, right? Like there's no anxiety, and I'm not following the news much, and I don't go out into that world much, but I'm pretty sure those young kids that are like dealing with things that anxiety, depression, the social media, phones, like just today, before I went on this call with you, we met up with our tribe, and the ages of the kids are, my son's the youngest at 1, up to, Merrick would be the oldest as well. He's actually at summer camp right now, but And he's almost 12, he'll be 12 in August, but they just play, and they have incredible imagination, and they all play with each other, right? Like there's no, oh, in school it's like you only play with kids that are also exactly the same age, and then you can't play with those kids. But they all play together. They all have an imagination. No, there's no phones. No one has a phone out. Not even the adults. Most, maybe someone gets a phone, but like, yeah, I rarely see a phone. Um, and, and there's also like such a, it's probably something you experienced in Lebanon and other countries where there's all the tribe works together, right? Like all these kids have grown up with these adults, and we're all family. Like there's not, in schools, there's the authority, right? The adults are the authority, and they tell you what you can and can't do, and it's just, it's unnatural, and it creates kids that I can't look at adults, right? I go out to restaurants, and there's like teenagers, people in their 20s that like don't even make eye contact, but they've been just in these authoritative systems. But that's not what it is in this homeschool community, right? Like we're all family. The kids all know the grown-ups. We respect each other. And the adults learn from the children. Like the children have gathered all these skills and can do these things. Like some of the boys love fishing. Um, they, my son will like catch frogs and crayfish, and they'll like, the kids will, if they catch things, they'll build a fire themselves. They'll fillet the animal themselves. They'll cook it and eat it. And the adults don't have to, we don't have to be a part of it at all. Like, and it probably sounds insane. It's just so my reality now that it doesn't sound that crazy to me, but like, we don't have to helicopter them. Like, we don't, I'm in a group, and we specifically chose our tribe because we are not the helicopter parent. And that reminds me of something you said earlier. You were talking about how great it was to grow up in the 90s. And I heard something recently that it was like strong men create good times, and then good times create weak men, and weak men create poor times, and then those poor times create strong men. So my hope is that we're on this like cyclical, like things are going to go really wrong or are already, right? But hopefully that then the next generation has to step up and be stronger than what's currently out there, because there's just not, your question was, what do I see in the homeschool community? And it's just, there's so much strength and beauty and freedom. But then sometimes I go into the real world, and like my kids are barefoot. I can't tell you how many times I've had just like adults comment on my kids being barefoot, and they're going to get sick, and like, and like they're grounding, they're super healthy. Like you need to get you need to get stronger. I don't say that, but it's like, it's just so sad how weak we've gotten, and how people think it's their business to like bubble wrap the entire world. Yeah, it's not good.
There are just so many little things, even like, walking barefoot is the most natural thing for your feet, and it's the best thing for your back. And so from a very young age, we're squeezing children's feet into, I'm going to bring up Clarks because that was the shoes to have for school if you could afford them. And I think that there was someone from the Clarks family who's now gone out on his own because he doesn't believe that Clarks shoes are conducive to, natural development and like things for the spine. It's not good for the spine. It's not good for the feet. So he's created his own line of shoes. I don't remember his name, but he was on Russell Brand's podcast. But they were the shoes to have as a kid, and I loved being barefoot, and it was a problem for everybody that I wanted to be barefoot. And so there are just so many aspects, like you said, that it's almost like everyone wants to parent your child. I'm that person that's trying to like unparent children. I'm like, no, just let her dig in the dirt, let her eat it. That's just normal. But I know for sure that when the apocalypse hits, I'm coming to your town. because you guys are going to be eating, being fine, and building protective shelters for everybody. So, what a way to live! The fact that your kids just go and build fires and prepare animals. Like, I can't even. You actually talk about it in the book, the processing of your food, and I was just like, it reminds me of Avatar. You know, when he learns to, when he does a kill, he kind of like says a prayer and thanks the Earth, Mother Earth, for providing whatever, and how he learns that. Um, I don't remember his name at all. But I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, like I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that. I love animals so much. Like I just, I'm one of those people, I'm like, I will, ignorance is bliss for this one. Someone else process it for me. How did you get to a place where you could process meat, Mary?
It's so funny. I just was having this conversation in the morning before I met up with my tribe. It's this I don't know, this other homeschool group we're doing summer camp. But they're so some of the people obviously are not us. Like they're not butchering their own uh, animals. And it was funny because one of the moms was saying how her kids, who are probably 7, 8, she doesn't think they even realize that chicken from the store is chicken, like the animal that they see at the, I don't know, farm they did it. And did you grow up like that? Do you think there wasn't a connection with food?
No, so we would go pick chickens and they would literally chop the heads off. This is in Lebanon. They would chop the heads off, wait for the chicken to run and bleed out, and then we would take the chicken home. But I would think as a child, oh my God, okay, and chuck the chickens in the boot. However, we now live in, we've been living in Australia for a number of years, and even though I've lived in different places, I remember my childhood like it was yesterday. And it's not so much that I have a problem with that. The I call it processing because the butchering, the butchering. I worked one day at a butcher, and I'm like, I'm not doing this ever again. When I was like 12, but I think it's I feel guilty. I think that's what it is for me because I'm such a lover of animals and animal rights and more so about the abuse of animals. That's what doesn't sit well with me. Not the don't eat animals because of the abuse. I think it's natural for us to eat animals. I think it's the way that we process our food that is the problem, the trauma that we make our cows and all those things, all the animals go through before they get to our plate. But I remember saying to my sister, do the girls know, like my nieces, that that burger is from a cow? She's like, don't say that. I'm like, what do you, but it's beef. It's from a cow. Does she know that? No. She loves going to the zoo. I'm like, oh my God. So my nieces are in a bubble, and I understand from my sister's perspective, who she is, that is something that's important for her in terms of protecting them as they were children. They now know, I think. But I find that it's just so common to not let children know where their food comes from because the parent thinks it might be traumatic for them.
Yeah, I think we're very similar. I think we've been on the same journey because I was similar to you, where you said you grew up, chickens were getting their head cut off. My dad was a hunter, so he would bring home deer, even bear on a couple occasions. But I didn't like it. I was against it. I mean, I ate meat, but I thought it was wrong. I remember like arguing with him on points of whether like to go and get a second doe or something, whatever it was. And then I got to the point where I was like pescatarian, right? I was only eating fish, and because because at that point, and probably where you are, I wasn't at a place where I could do it correctly, right? Like you can't trust, especially today, right? You can't trust like, oh, they're saying cage free eggs or whatever, right? Like you can't trust that the animal's actually having a good life unless you have that really deep connection. So initially it was like, okay, I'm not going to eat that. And then it got to the point where I was like, I'm going to eat the meat, but I'm going to have to be a part of the process, right? or at least as close as I can, right? We actually don't have meat animals on our property. I actually want them more than my husband. He doesn't, like, as I talk about in the book, like, I was the one that processed the deer that was roadkill on our property. The people I was talking to, the woman I was talking to this morning, were like, every time I drive by a deer on the road, I think of you and whether I should call you to eat it. But we know the source of most of the meat, other than, like, sometimes we buy cold cuts and we don't know. But all of our beef, all of our pig, lamb, that comes from the same friend of ours. Our friends process rabbits. We get chicken from a farm that is right down the road that we like. We see the chickens, right? My kids see the chickens, and then, oh, the chickens are gone. Now they're in the freezer. um, but so I haven't actually dispatched, which is like killing of the animals, that many, but I actually worked myself up. So if you actually do want to do this, I went from fish, right? I was like, okay, I'm going to kill a fish when my husband catches it. Did that. Then I worked my way up to the poultry family, and I processed chickens when a friend was having like a processing chicken party. And then I did one of my friend's rabbits, which was tough. The way you dispatch a rabbit is a little rough. But I also do want to, when my kids are older, I got my hunting license a couple of years ago, but I don't have the time to go sit in the woods. But yeah, and now I'm close enough to the process, right? Like, that's the difference, is like, when you're really removed from it, you might want to, like, be vegan or vegetarian because you just don't have the ability to control, because most of the animals, yes, are abused in the way they're raised and the way they're transported before they're dispatched. But the closer you get to these systems, right, the closer you get to the food, you have that ability to make sure it's done correctly.
Do you want to age backwards, get better sleep, improve your memory, boost your immune function, and improve your circulation? Then the healing properties of red light therapy is your answer. When I noticed my skin, energy, and mood lacking luster, I spent countless hours researching the best solutions that would help me get my health back on track, and that's when I found EMR Tech. This science-backed, non-invasive treatment uses red and near-infrared light to activate your body's natural healing processes, supporting your body in boosting circulation, reducing inflammation, and assisting in the production of collagen. The results? Wow. Smoother skin, better sleep, less pain in the joints, more energy, and a serious glow up from the inside out. It's a powerful year-round solution that helps reset the negative effects of spending too much time indoors, on screens, and not getting enough sleep. I'm obsessed with my FireWave Pro panel, and it has become my go-to for deep cellular level healing. I just pop it on for 20 minutes every night before bed to wind down, reset, and recharge. It has made a world of difference to the quality of sleep I get each night and how my face shows up in the morning. To get yourself a glow up, head on over to www.emr-tech, that's tek.com/the skin I'm in, and use code the skin I'm in for 30% off every order. I've popped the link and code in the show notes to make your life that little bit easier. Alrighty, let's get back to the show, folks. It's interesting. I have no issues with gutting fish. I feel like, I know this may sound weird to anyone listening, but to me, I'm like, I know marine life have souls, but to me, fish, I'm like, they just seem like dead souls to me. So I don't have a problem with fish and chicken, and maybe that's because of my upbringing. But because I've done a few farm stays and I've met like rescue calf and, baby goats and baby deers and all of these things, and I've spent time with them, I'm like, I remember meeting, her name was Muriel. She was this beautiful, beautiful baby cow that was on a farm, and this lady had rescued her. And I used to I stopped eating meat after meeting her, because I'm like, how can I honestly not acknowledge just how incredible they are? I had never met a cow before. They have feelings, they have souls. They're just magnificent. If you look into a cow's eyes, they're little eyelashes. And I'm like, I cannot eat beef after this. And so I didn't eat meat for a very long time. I think it was maybe 3-4 years. I still don't eat chicken. It's just too hard to find really clean organic chicken. So I just stay away from it. I haven't eaten it for a long time. But I remember in 2021, and I don't know why, I was going through a really, an absolute breakdown that year. I lost so many people from my life, and I suddenly started craving red meat. And I'm like, why? And I almost feel like I had to build my strength, because the resilience that I have developed and the strength I've developed in the last 4 or 5 years is unlike anything that, I thought I was strong before, but now it's like unshakable. And so I feel a lot like I was called to, because I needed strength and I needed that kind of strength. And so now I try to be really careful what kind of meat that I buy, but I don't live anywhere where, and if I did buy from a farm, I have to buy like a whole cow. So I need to split it with someone. I don't eat that much meat. I don't eat that much. So it's one of those things that I'm like, I need to work towards for myself. But the processing of beautiful beings, and I want to talk about faith with you, because this is something that, really hit home for me in your book as well, because I feel like the more work that I do and the closer I become to myself as a woman and the more connected I become to Mother Earth, the more faith I develop. And I think because of that, I just feel so at one with, like cows and deers and lamb and goats and all these things. And I'm not saying that I don't eat them, because I do have a mostly keto diet. But I think that for me, what I really struggle with are the processing practices of large, aggie systems that we have, and the way that they're processing animals and the way that they're taking baby calves away from their mothers, and how pus-filled their udders are. And it's disgusting. Like the people who still drink milk from the store, who have no idea why they're pasteurized and homogenized.
Mhm.
It's to kill the bacteria so that you don't get poisoned, not because raw milk is actually bad for humans. It's because their cows are so polluted and injected and filled with pus. It's making me sick to say it.
Yeah.
But these are the things that I really struggle with. And I saw a clip of this beautiful cow who'd just gone into, it must be the thing that, I don't know, cuts their heads off. I don't know what it does, but you saw her face and she had a moment of sheer terror. Oh, I'll never forget that clip. And it's almost like she knew she was about to die. And so one of the things that you said about, being vegan, I think that everyone can rave on about becoming vegan so that we can save animals, but that's not the answer, because there are still going to be people, and there's so much scientific evidence. As much as I hate the Western medical system, we do a lot of research into things like carnivore diets and how good it is for most humans, some humans, a lot of humans. Not everyone's going to turn vegan. And so we really have to look at the practices that we have in place to process the meat that we're eating, so that we're not eating traumatized meat, so that we're not eating toxic meat. And that's what's going to make the difference, because the demand for it is always going to be there. You can't make everybody vegan. And I don't know about you, but I'm not eating lab-grown meat ever.
Right.
Like, you will survive. Your family's going to survive because you know how to survive the apocalypse. But most people don't. And they'll push you in the direction to having lab-grown meat because, I don't know about the US at the moment, but Australians are, or at least on my side of the fence, are up in arms about Appeal being approved for organic produce. I'm like, how is Appeal, the coating that they're putting on, fruits and vegetables, being approved for organic food? How? I don't care what it's made of. It's not organic if there's a coating on it. So yeah, there are just so many industries that profit from us being sick. There are so many industries that profit from us being disconnected from our womb space, from our femininity, from our masculinity, from having any kind of sovereignty, to having to be able to think for ourselves. And that for me is where the faith piece comes in. And I love that you have a whole chapter on this, because I think a lot of us have very little left to believe in. And so what has changed for you in that respect, and what have you found through your faith?
Yeah, that was the most surprising chapter for me, as it played out in my life and as I felt the calling from God that I had to include that chapter. Um, it's because it was, you know, quick, quick story about it. Grew up Catholic, like so many people, and the Catholic Church, at least that I was a part of, none of it made sense. There was no relationship with God. It was just about following rules, at least the time that I was there, at least. And so I never, even though I grew up in a faithful family, at least my mom and my mom's side of the family, I was anti it from the youngest age I could remember. And if you told me 10 years ago that I would write a chapter about God, I would have laughed at you. But God, I believe God is always speaking to us, and it's just a matter of when we decide to listen. And as I've learned to listen, as I started to see the ways that God was pointing me in certain directions, it's now become so exponentially quick. I feel like this intimate relationship, this talking with God, almost like I can say something and then I see it appear. So let me back up a little bit and I'll explain how that all unfolded. But I kind of accidentally walked into a church, right? Still very anti-religion, which religion we could go down there, but we don't need to.
No, tell the whole story, because where were you before you walked into that church,
Okay.
Mary? That is, I want that whole. I want to have my audience to hear that whole story. I was like, damn, girl, okay.
So yeah, I was at a rave, essentially, an electronic. I can't even remember. It was Nora and Pure in Brooklyn. My husband and I, and we, had that night. We wake up in the morning and we are walking on the streets of Brooklyn. And I had no idea God was going to show up there, right? But my husband had to go to the bathroom, and there's no public bathroom. So I was like, there's a church right there. They'll let us go in. We go in, and it just happens to be, right, or God planned it, that it was as the service was starting. So we walk in, and they so kindly give us a pamphlet, and we go sit down so as not to be rude. And my husband walks off to the bathroom, and I'm just in this short amount of time, right? 5-10 minutes of him going to the bathroom, coming back. I actually went. I come back, and just what I felt in that church. My husband's like, "Okay, you ready to go now?" And I was like, "I kind of want to stay," and I really wanted to stay. And so we sat through the whole service and crying, and something was just moved in me, right? And that's what's so crazy about faith. And like, as I'm on this journey now, it's like, I grew up so intellectual, right? I think everyone's so intellectual, and in, what is that, the left brain, your intellect. And so we try to make sense of things, and we're like, oh, this doesn't make sense. And so I was so anti faith because I couldn't understand it. But like, until you feel that connection with God, that relationship, and I felt it a little. I felt like that spark in the church, and I needed more of it. And I denied it, and someone called me like a closet Christian when I told this story to them recently, because I would just like only go to church if I was like out of town. I would sneak away to whatever church I could find. And then I found, when I decided I needed to find a church in my hometown, and I love telling this story because it just so perfectly points out how God was moving in my life. I was looking for a church. I remembered I had met this pastor once at a party, so I Googled his church, and on the website is a picture of my son and I. And we were at a community event that, unbeknownst to us at the time, it was a movie, was being put on by the church. So I was like, okay, I'm supposed to be here. So I went to that church. In COVID, then that was the week before COVID was the first time I went into that church. And then COVID happened and everything shut down. And like during that time too, it was easy for me to see like, wow, people have lost faith so much. They don't believe, like we need as humans to believe in something higher than ourselves. And when we don't, that higher thing ends up being Anthony Fauci or, or the government or CNN or Fox or whoever it is, right? Like we idolize these things because there's this God hole that isn't being filled. And so I was able to see that playing out during COVID too, which made me, it just all started making sense and continue to go to that church. And then it was really not until I turned 40 in September, that's really when I decided to write this book also. That's less than a year ago. And I switched churches then. I was feeling the call from God. I'm grateful for that first church I went to, but I was feeling the call that there was something else out there. And so I found a church right next to the house that I bought, which I believe we bought this house partially for this reason. And it's a spirit-filled church, right? I'd never heard of the Holy Spirit. I grew up in a Catholic church. I knew there was God. I knew there was Jesus. I didn't know the Trinity, right? I didn't know the Holy Spirit. And it really is this beautiful piece of God, right? That God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit still lives in us. It gives us the power of Jesus. And I've been thinking about it's played out so perfectly. And like I said, I just feel this real connection with God. Like I never understood that I could communicate with God before. I know you've had that at such a young age, and that's such a gift. And I don't know if time I'd love to hear it. You've probably shared it on your podcast before, but simple things like my husband and I were talking about how we wanted black caps on our property the other day, and so my husband says, "Oh, I'm gonna go cut down this part of our property, and I'll make a berry patch there for black caps." He goes to do it, and there's an abundance of black caps already there, and I mean, and that's just a small piece of it. Or even just like I flew to California last week, and I'm on the airplane, and the whole time I'm looking out the window and I'm just looking at the beauty of the part of the country I was in, because it's not the part of the country that you were just talking about where the farming is atrocious and like the housing developments are just poor. But it was a beautiful southwest of the country. And I was just the whole time like, God, you are so great. You made so much beauty. And the flight ends, and I just turned to the woman next to me and I said, "Wow, it's just, this country is so beautiful." And she said, "Yeah, God made the most amazing land." And we started talking about God, and I told her how I recently, found God, and how I was like, was I saying that out loud during the flight? Because she said I wouldn't have brought God up to most people, but I knew I wanted to talk to you about how God created this country. So I felt like I had said it out loud, but I didn't need to. And that's what's so beautiful. It's like so much of my life in the last several years has just, and even the really challenging the struggle, I now see that God was there through all of it. And it all makes so much sense. I'm going to leave it at that for now. I wonder what you have to say.
You use the word God. And for a very long time, that was a huge trigger for me. And I remember as a child, when I did have my experience, I don't know if I brought it up on the podcast, but when I did have that experience, my grandfather came to me. He was a priest, and we lost him when I was 5. But he is my guardian angel, and I knew from that day forward he is always with me, and he is. So whenever, I'll tell you the next part offline, but whenever I know he's around, he actually sends me something physical. And so I always know that he's with me, and I have conversations with him all the time. But it's funny, my dog's looking at me. Yes. But I remember for a long time, I would be really combative or confronting to things like my scripture teacher. Do you remember the days where scripture was part of the school curriculum? God forbid that happens now, by the way. God forbid that happens now. But we used to have scripture when I was in grade 4 and grade 5 and 6, and they were the 90s. And I used to be like, well, how do you know there's proof of Jesus? And so I used to be that kid and was sent out of class so many times, sent to the principal's office. I was put into counseling because of it, but it never stopped me from being like, there's more to this story that you're not telling us. There's more to God and consciousness and spirituality, because I have seen it with my own eyes that there is something that we are not being taught here. And for so many years, I would be that student. And I remember in year 10, my Mr. Duffy, oh, that man, he pulled me out of class because, again, I said to him, there are cave paintings from thousands of years ago. Why did Jesus not paint on a cave? Like, so we have evidence of civilizations. Where was Jesus? I'm like, why didn't he write his own book? Like, I'm like, I need more evidence. But I remember him being like, pulled me out, and he's like, look, I get that you have questions and you absolutely have a right to, but I don't have answers for your questions and I need to teach a class. So can we just agree that you have a more open mind to these things, but I need to get through the curriculum, please? I was like, okay, I'll accept that. Just as long as we're on the same page, that there's more to this story. And he's like, yes. I was like, all right, well, I'll go back to class then. And so I just remember thinking that, and he really made me be like, yeah, I'm not giving up on this. And so I've done a lot of studies and my own research into religion, into the Bible, into understanding the most ancient version of the teachings of the scripture, which is the Ethiopian Bible. And while I disliked the word God for a very long time, it became a trigger for me because, again, you know, as a kid growing up in war and seeing a lot of death and knowing that I'm being separated from my family, and I come from generations of people who have had to survive. We were actually Armenian by heritage, and so my great grandmothers were survivors of the genocide in 1915, and so I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them walking through the desert with their children after their husbands were shot in front of them to Lebanon and Syria, where my family eventually settled. And so I have that in my genetic coding, survival, you know. And I feel them with me. And so the more I started to understand who I am as a woman, or get to know who I am, get to know who my grandparents, great grandparents, we don't even know their names. Like, I don't know the as far back as we go, we know my mum's grandmother, but we don't know anything beyond that. So my lineage has been cut off, but I sense them and I feel them. And the more work that I do and the more spiritual I become, the more I have this belief in the divine. And I think that we get so hung up on the word because it's been tarnished so much that it doesn't actually matter what you call it. We all know that there is a greater knowing, a greater power, a divinity that is the reason why we're here. So why deny that? It doesn't matter what you call it. Like, why deny that? And so the more spiritual I become, I'm becoming more religious. So it's so funny that you develop faith when you start to reconnect with womanhood, with manhood, with the earth, with the other beings that we share this planet with, and with our own sense of self. And so I think that we're always called, whether we answer that phone call or not is up to us. But gee whiz, you know, sometimes I wish I answered that call earlier.
Yeah, me too. I was the same as you. We are like sisters that never met. Yeah, same thing. I was so triggered by the word God. And even it wasn't until, I mean, within this past year, because it was really like this church that I'm in now, that it was so weird. Like words that I remember even hearing a worship song. The worship music at my church is amazing and it always moved me. But there was a song and they said Yahweh, and I had never even really thought of that word. And all of a sudden I was crying. And so it's things like that. And, you know, I would only want to say I was hesitant to write the chapter on my faith, but sometimes I feel like, oh, I shouldn't be talking about Christianity because I'm so new to it. But then I remind myself, like, since I've answered the call of God, I have been on such a strong pursuit of God, and it's really like God has shown up in my life, and I don't want to unvalidate that. That's the word. Like, I don't want to take power away from that because I'm too new, right? Like I don't know the Bible enough or whatever. All I know is my experience, and that's what I really tried to write this book from, a place of like, you, people can call me whatever they want to call me, but I'm sharing my experience, and my experience is that, yeah, I once hated the word God, and now I talk daily with God. And same thing, like you were just saying, like I recently was, you know, things we can get hung up on, right? Like we can get hung up on the pronouns of saying he for God. And I was thinking about this recently. It's good we did this call after I flew to California because I had a flight without my children to think uninterrupted. And I was thinking about it. And then the long story short, I came to the conclusion of like, my experiences are so real since I've been on this journey of Christianity that the semantics of it don't matter to me, at least. And that's enough for me, I guess. I know what I've been experiencing, the physical experiences. I mean, obviously the spiritual, the emotional experiences, but I've even had physical experiences. I went to a Holy Spirit conference several months ago and just had an experience that I didn't know was possible, that was undeniable. And I didn't even include it in the book because it felt like something that was, for the time being, was just for me. But it's things like that. It's things like that that once you know, you can't unknow. And so I'm sure you feel the same way. Like I can look back at my younger self that was so, like, I judged anyone just like people are probably judging me. Like if someone said they went to church or that they believed in God or they said Jesus, like my perception of them as a person changed. And why, it's just like I said with the vaccines, right? Like why was I so triggered by something? And I think with this piece that was so triggering, it's because we all want that deep down. We all want to believe in a higher power, a God, a moral code, right? Like all of these things are what we intrinsically desire. And when we don't have it, we get so triggered by somebody who so unabashedly does have that. And so I'm really happy that I've made it to this side of that. And that's why I had to share it, even though I knew it would turn some people off. And so thank you for being open to me sharing my story of faith.
Look, there are the good and bad in everything. And like you, I would hear people like born again Christians and be like, ugh, like you need something outside of yourself to believe in. That was my belief. I'm like, you need something outside of yourself to believe in, and what a shame that is. But the more I learn about the divine, the more I realize that it isn't actually outside of ourselves. It is within all of us. That's what our spirit is. That is where our soul comes from. And so it isn't something that is outside of ourselves to have faith in. It's within us to have faith within us and ourselves, our intuition, our gut feelings. They're so important as women, especially. But the divine is that. That is what that is. And so where I used to think, you need something outside of yourself to believe in. And a lot of people do look to religion as it is today, because it's not painted with a very nice brush, to save them when they don't realize that they can actually save themselves. And that's what God has taught me. I can save myself. Like that is my role. That is radical accountability. I am here to do my work in this timeline. I've been brought to this earth at this point because that is what I'm here to do. And it's these conversations that I believe I'm meant to be having, because I was starved of this as a child. I was starved of this as a young woman who was trying to navigate her way through life, feeling really uncomfortable. And thank God, in so many ways, I stuck to, I'm like, no, this is who I want to be. And I used to get really tired of people saying, oh, but you're like marriage material and I'm not ready to get married, or you're just so serious, or lighten up. And I'm like, lighten up just because I don't want to get drunk, take drugs, and fool around with some guy I don't know. Like, how is that lightening up? And so I felt really out of place, but I always had faith in whatever was talking to me, my downloads. And there have been many where I'm about to ask a question of a guest, and I was literally editing an episode yesterday, and I went, no, I'm hearing that I should not be talking about this. Okay, I understand. I won't talk about it. And I was just like, oh my God. So the closer that I get to myself, the more my faith builds and the more trust I have in that, the more downloads I get. Like, it is such a beautiful unraveling. And this is like the knitted sweater that I want to rip apart. Like, I'm like, give me that thread. Let me pull at it. Like, because it is so beautiful. Once people get on that journey, it is so beautiful. And I think that's what moved me so much about your book. So I'm going to like start talking about your book now, because to write a book is no small feat. And I anticipate something healed inside of you as you wrote that. So what was that? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's a good segue because you just were talking about like hearing from God. And I really feel like this book was just, it came through God. Like I felt such confidence. I wrote it most of the time like 2 a.m. because that's when I had time to write. I'd wake up in the middle of the night. Right? I felt like God would wake me up and be like, okay, and I would sit down and it would just flow out of me. And so that gave me a lot of confidence too, because I wrote some things in here that I could have been pretty worried about how people would receive it. And I mean, it is what it is. But I wasn't scared because I felt like or I knew, and I know that God wanted me to share this story. That I feel like I was given the path that I was on life, and some of them really tumultuous and some of them really beautiful. But I took that path. I was on that path so that I could share it with other women. I think, like my son's hospital birth, like I experienced that so I could share that with other women and show them that there's a better way. I showed them, like I was inside public education so that I could shine a light on how it's not working for most children. And then I was brave enough to step out of it and shine a light on that. So anyways, yeah, I really feel like this book came through me from God. And yeah, since writing it, it's crazy. It was a 40-year dream of mine to write a book. And then it did so quickly, like it happened so easily. I published it. And then my life has just kind of been happening, and it seems to have been exponentially getting better too, right? Like I just feel like I'm in this really sweet spot in life. It's been hard for me to even promote it too much. So thank you for letting me be on your podcast. Since I talked to you just for like our preliminary talk, I've toyed with like, should I get an Instagram account? Like, you're saying yes. And I guess I should, to put it out there more. I guess I'm just wary. I really want to stay authentic. And I mean, I think I will always be an authentic person, but I know how insidious the social media world can be, and I don't want it to I don't want it to change me and my authenticity and my reason for writing this book. So I guess I've been leaving it to God for a little while, and He brought you to me, and I'm on this podcast now. But yeah, I do. And the interesting thing too is it's been finding its way into the hands of people it needs to go to. Like my husband brought it to this store in Columbia County, like a farm where they actually do take care of the cows. They like leave the horns on the female cows. You love it. It's actually Abby Rockefeller's farm. But anyways, my husband brings it there to like get it for sale. And the woman took it to give it to her boss. She just left it on the desk. And so somebody else came into work that day and just picked it up. But God wanted her to read it, right? It was meant for her. So and it's not for sale in the store. And I could be upset about that, but I'm not, because that young woman called me after reading it and shared how it has now inspired her to change her life, and she wants to quit her job. And she asked me advice, and we prayed together, and it was really beautiful. And so right now I'm sitting back in this sweet spot of letting the book move into the hands of who it's supposed to. And I feel like I will know the time that I need to do more with it, maybe. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, that's what I've been up to since I wrote it.
Look, I know I said to, get on socials, and whether it's Instagram or TikTok, I've heard that TikTok is really, really helping creators with that. And I'm so not into social media myself, and so I even find it hard. But one of the things that I'm really present to is that it doesn't take your authenticity away until you start making content only for likes. And so when I'm making content and when I'm putting things up on socials, I put stuff up that resonates with me. I put stuff up that I want to hear. And so whether it gets the likes or the views, it doesn't really matter to me. But I think that if you shared some of your daily things, there's a girl who's being absolutely, granted, she's being attacked for being, what do they call them? Trad wives? That's a new term for me. But I'm like, what is a trad wife? Even traditional wife? Or as if that's a bad thing to say. She does homesteading, and she does a lot of videos of her cooking for her family, of being on the farm and all this kind of stuff. And they've been attacked quite a bit. However, I think that as long as you stay true to what you are trying to share, and what you share is so beautiful. The way that you shared about every single chapter, and I'm not going to mention the names of the chapters because I think that they are a beautiful choice, and the order that you chose them is just perfect. And so I think that if you shared that with people, the message, it's not even about the book so much. It's the message that's in the book that really matters. It's the way that you're living your life, the proof that it's real. Like, it's like how you said, you didn't even know that this was a life that you could have. And so I think that it gives hope. It gives me hope. It certainly gives me hope, especially that, all this, I don't know who your husband is, but he sounds like a wonderful man. And like you said, every relationship has hardships. There is no such thing as perfect and seamless and what have you, but that is life. Life is chaos. Life is messy. Relationships are messy. Being a mum is hard. Being a woman is hard. Being a man is hard. Everything's has its hard, but it also has its joy. And so being able to share what you've put into this book, and I can feel the love in the book. And I think that's why I was so moved by it. I think that's what matters the most. So it doesn't matter how you do it, whether it's talking to people, getting on podcasts, having socials, it actually doesn't matter. It's just, please just keep talking about it. Don't be afraid to talk about the book. The book is beautiful. It's written I love that you swear. I'm like, I did not expect some of the swearing in the book. I was like, oh, Mary, okay. So, yeah, I loved every part of the book. And one of the things that I was left with was, apart from all the things that I've asked you today, it's, when you reflect on all of the things that you've done, who you've become, who you're continuing to become, what do you think you love most about being a woman?
I mean, simply put, I would say being a mother. But yeah, it's just creating life. I love what you said. You said something about whatever a woman gets, she multiplies. And that's so beautiful. I've never heard that before. So thank you for sharing that and all the things you share. But yeah, we're creators, right? Like, we create as women, and like you said, whatever that is that you create. And I guess I don't even want to say that trad wife. I guess I'm a traditional wife, but I create babies and I create the future, right? I create future generations, and I get to learn all the things that I wish I learned sooner in life, and then I get to pass them on to my children. So like I said, at age 1, my son can know things that I didn't know, right? And yeah, I can sum it up in that. I love being a mother. I do, and I don't care what. Thank you for sharing that about the social media. I really think that is inspiring, and I think that's probably a spiritual piece of it, right? Like being in that world like you are, to like get past the whether it's liked or not. That's probably healing in some way for people that do share themselves on social media. So I think I will try that, and yeah, and I guess I won't care whether someone makes fun of me, because I unabashedly love being a mother. I love being a woman. I love being a homemaker, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, trad wife is what you are, and
Or
you're
that.
gonna wear that proudly. I'm like, I'm really feeling this new word. I want to be one, so I'm like, give it to me, whatever that looks like. Mary, gosh, it has been just deeply healing to read your book and to have this conversation. I just am so grateful that Cheryl Daly, who was the opening episode of season 5, she put me in contact with you, and I'm so glad that she did, and that our worlds have crossed paths, because I forever want to know what you are doing, what you are up to, the next book you write, or the socials that you create from it. Please tell my listeners where they can find you and where they can grab a copy of Taking Back My Life.
So I do have a website, marywainwright.com, and I think they're going to link that. And you can buy my book on Amazon. It's also available through Troy Bookmaker. I'll send you that link also. There is an ebook on Kindle now. I like the paper copy, but whatever works for you. Yeah, and maybe Chanel will inspire me, and I'll get on this Instagram or whatever the kids are using these days.
I'm so happy to hear that. And yes, I also prefer actual books. I never want actual books to go out of anything. Please keep writing. Please keep creating physical books, because I think that it is the only way we are going to really be able to hang on to real history. Because anything online can be altered. So yes, I will include in the episode description and across socials links and ways you can do that. So if you haven't already, head on over to Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, Apple Podcasts, follow the Skin I'm In podcast to be the first to know when new episodes drop. Mary, thank you so much for being a guest on the Skin I'm In podcast.
Thank you, Jeanette.
I knew when I started reading Mary's book that this woman was brought into my orbit to give me the faith and hope I desperately need during a time in my life that feels very chaotic. As I shed my own limiting beliefs and my life transforms from what I have known to be my reality over the last 3 years, Mary's words left an imprint on my heart, and so did this conversation. No word of a lie. Mary lives the life I dream of having. And whether you resonate with her way of life or not, whether it challenges you or comforts you, I invite you to reflect on what might change if you allowed yourself the same level of freedom and gave yourself permission to write the story of your life the way you dream in your heart. Would your life look as it does today? Before I actively started healing, I was already down so many rabbit holes and spiritually awake for sure, but mentally and emotionally disconnected from the source of my essence. I had trauma and scars that were deep, and wounds still infected with hurt, guilt, and shame. I had shut off my inner compass because the world told me it was nonsense. God forbid you listen to your intuition. I was taught that my intuition was lying to me. I was also conditioned to believe that motherhood was a trap that I shouldn't want to get into, and that freedom meant career accolades, sexual empowerment, and chasing money like my worth depended on it. But it all felt off. It felt forced. It felt fake. It felt like someone was trying to pollute me, my friends, my family, my colleagues, and that I was the only one who could see it. I felt like a raving lunatic for decades, but something kept guiding me, and it was this knowing that brought me back home to myself, and thank God it did, because I wouldn't be the woman that I am today, and this podcast would not exist. I feel like most of you listening know this already, but This version of freedom that we're sold, it's a mirage. So if this is new to you, I'm here to tell you, everything you think is giving you freedom right now, it's actually not real. True freedom isn't conformity dressed up as empowerment. It isn't being monitored by governments who reveal nothing while demanding everything from their citizens. It isn't buying food that actually poisons us but is somehow legal to be on the shelves. It isn't trading our souls for a salary, living for the weekend, waiting for a mythical retirement to finally begin living. No, this isn't freedom. This is programming at its finest, and it happens every day in our lives. Real freedom is remembering that you are the sovereign one, that you came here with wisdom, with power, with divine essence running through your veins, and you don't need to earn your liberation. You just need to reclaim it the way Mary has. Mary's life reminded me of what's possible when we surrender the scripts and soften into the truth, into creation, into receiving. You don't have to agree with her way of life, but you're allowed to wonder. You're allowed to want more. And you're allowed to choose a different way. With gratitude and grace, have a wonderful day.